B, I buy into to a great extent. For instance, the celebrities where, I think they manufacture a celebrity scandal, and then there's something else they've planned to do, and whilst we're being distracted by focusing on that scandal, whatever is going to happen happens, and then by the time we come back to reality, it's already too late. So I believe in that. I do believe in that aspect of the conspiracy theory. But all the other aspects of conspiracy theory, I would take with a pinch of salt, because unless you can substantiate, unless there's a substance to it, I don't believe in it. Because then you where does it stop? Where does it end? You believe in anything and everything, you know. So that's I think that's to the extent that I would say I believe in
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, the
conspiracy.
thing is what about though? That's a very general comment, a good comment about conspiracy theories, and probably most of us would agree that you can't take on board and believe everything by way of a conspiracy theory. But individual conspiracy theories, maybe it's a different question, because, for example, fairly recently, another report, or not so much a report, but papers were released, great numbers of papers were released about President Kennedy's assassination
Right.
back in, I think it was in the 1960s. Now, a lot of people have a view on that over the years, because perhaps when someone is assassinated like that, over time, a lot of their life story and what they did, what they didn't do, came out. Now, as I understand it, he was a very impressive, clever president of the United States.
Right.
Um, and I think there were problems. There was a risk of a nuclear war with the USSR, as it was then, Russia,
Right.
because they wanted to put some nuclear missiles in Cuba, right on the doorstep of Florida, really. And it was a real war of attrition. And Kennedy, when you read the stories about this, he held strong. He said, no, he's not going to, he will retaliate if they put them there. And eventually, the USSR president back down. But it brought the world apparently quite close to a world war. But that, be that as it may, he also had a checkered personal life. I don't think it's disclosing anything that isn't known that he had affairs, apparently with one with Marilyn Monroe. Um, and there's another conspiracy theory there that she was murdered, but I mean that's going off at a tangent. But anyway, these papers that were recently released, I don't know whether it was because Trump said when he got to be the president again, he wanted to find out about these things or release information. I don't know whether that's why they were released, but anyway, they were. But actually, I mean, some of it was in the press, and it seems to me that huge amounts of this paper's release, they were redacted. They were just blacked out of the lines. So many pages. And so, of course, all that really does. So the papers ultimately didn't say much more than people knew anyway. But all it really does is then fuel the conspiracy theory to say, well, why have they got so much to hide on that? So maybe that's an example of where people can say, yeah, one way or another, I think the CIA maybe was to do with the murder of President. To do with the murder of President Kennedy, we don't know, because there's no real hard evidence either way. And if it was covered up like that, then presumably it will always remain covered up. So that's a specific one. Another famous person who was murdered, again in America, is John Lennon.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that was in 1980. He'd gone out in the morning with Yoko, his partner, his wife, and there was a fan there at the bottom of his building, the Dakota building, just outside Central Park in New York. And I think John signed a book for him in the morning. And this chap, Mark Chapman, said, "Well, I'll be here later on when you come back because I want you to sign a record cover." So, anyway, later on, they did come back. John Lennon, as I understand it, signed the record cover as he was expecting to see the guy there. And as he turned to walk away, this fellow opened fire. He hit John Lennon 4 times in the back and 1 in the side. And I think John cried out, "I've been shot, help me." The doorman, who's permanently on duty there, sort of grabbed the gunman, but he said, "No, don't." He said, "I'm not." He dropped his gun. "I'm not running anywhere," and he stayed there. And of course, the emergency services came and took him to hospital, John Lennon, and he died. Sad to say. And that man, Mark Chapman, robbed the world of an interesting man. He had a lot of enemies, has to be said, in high places, but he was a very talented man, and maybe he would have mellowed a bit as the years went by, etc., etc. His wonderful song "Imagine" and many other songs. But what a lot of conspiracy theorists say is that because he was a thorn in the flesh, the thorn in the side of the American government, partly because he was so against the Vietnam War, which was kind of it was over by then, but he had always upset the Americans when he was trying to get his green card to live in America post Beatles. So they felt it was distinctly possible that the government could have had him killed, and that Mark Chapman killed him because he was subject to mind control. Now, now there's another conspiracy theory. Is there such a thing as mind control? This has been explored in a number of films whereby apparently an individual can be so processed and made to react to certain stimuli in an earpiece or something that is said that they hear, and they react in a certain way. Now, I don't know whether there's such a thing, but a lot of people believe that this fellow killed John Lennon because he didn't run anywhere. He was calm, he was placid, and he answered all the questions. He went to prison, and I think he was going to be eligible for release, strangely, after 20 years. Well, in fact, he's still in prison.